They shall all be yours. With the aid of my children. Do you accept?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Don't forget, we need to be able to control the people.
But we need to control the dragons more.
The wheels of revolution are turning, and bloodshed is sure to follow.
I come from a land where everybody calls themselves a king. Einar will soon be next.
I do love you, Galen. But I don't know if I could ever love you as my husband.
The child that burns is no Targaryen.
But he was your son.
I was better off back at the wall.
Good morning, everyone. I thought I'd start things off with an old trailer that I made after putting out the pilot. I put out that Doom of Valyria was like 20 minutes long, and I was trying to get some traction going. I was like, dang, it's kind of tough asking people to sit down for 20 minutes if they're not sure they like something yet. So then afterwards, I put together a 1.5-minute trailer, but this was like a couple months after I put it out, and people are like, what are you doing? I want more content, not just a rehashing of what. It's like, yeah, but I'm trying to get people to say like, okay, yeah, I'll sit for 20 minutes. Well, good morning, everyone. So I have a list of things to talk about. I did a poll with everybody about Doom of Valyria, and also I wanted to talk some about Paraland, and try to link it together, because like Doom of Valyria is definitely a very, it's Game of Thrones world, but very much a sword and sorcery type of fantasy world, and Paraland definitely wants to be that as well. So I will talk some about that at the end, but I wanted to first start with Doom of Valyria stuff. So as I said, I did a poll, and the majority of people wanted to hear more about the world building of Paraland. Of Doom of Valyria. And I was excited to see that, because I put a lot of work into it, and I even pulled out an old notebook. So whenever I'm working on any projects, I have a stack of notebooks. Like, I always like to start drafting things on paper, because once you go to the computer, things start to change. It's kind of like, I'm sure anybody, it's like when you're writing or you're kind of thinking out your thoughts, like it doesn't work too well if you just go like if you're trying to write a book or write an essay, if you go right to the screen, it's tough. So anyway, I have like this whole stack of notebooks that all of my latest projects and stuff that I've been working on, full of ideas, some sketches, drawings, ideas. That one's very story driven, but this is from years ago. This is the main one that I wrote out the ideas I was going to have for Doom of Valyria. And so let's see. Yeah. So you could see even here, it's like, this is me listing out what characters I want to put in there. Glendro, Ben Stark, Stannis, Gaiman, Einar, Rhaenyra Targaryen. Yeah. R'hllor, which we all know who that is. Tremor. Oh, Tamor. So this wasn't the final list. This was like my first draft of things, right? But so yeah, I wrote out a whole bunch of ideas, tried to, and then yeah, I also have like the full extended outline of what all the scenes were going to be, but we'll get into that later. So the first thing I want to start with was how I built the world for Doom of Valyria, because that got the most votes. I think the easiest and most obvious part of it was Rome, right? It's like George R. R. Martin spelled it out. Like what like I had the idea to make the Doom of Valyria prequel, but then it was like when I was looking up about what George would say about it, like he had a passage where uh, the Valyrians laid salt to the fields of the Giscari, and that's like word for word what the Romans did to the Carthaginians, right? So it's kind of like, all right, George is saying Valyria is Rome. So like it was easy after that, right? It's like, okay, let me learn as much about Rome as possible. Let me stop real quick, by the way. Got a few people here. I'm just talking, but I'm happy to engage with anybody. You guys popped on. There's a chance for you to interact. So I would love to hear what inspired you to jump on, what you want to hear. Because I'm going to keep going about like the world building and the lore changes. But while there's people here, feel free to chime in. I'm not going to like. I'll even allow myself to be a little ADD, like mid sentence, see a comment pop up, and it's like, yo, let me address that. Anybody here from last week, or are these all new people sitting in here right now? Like anybody who wants to chime in, just a little. Never been. Figured I'd pop in and then pop right back out. But Doom of Valyria has been getting some hits lately. I imagine some of you guys are new because House of the Dragon's been going on, and so people are like, well, hey, let me find out more about any Game of Thrones prequel, and Doom of Valyria pops up, and then you're like, wait, Doom of Valyria came out how many years ago? Yeah, a few years ago, even older than Stewie Potter. So yeah, we got people in here, but what anybody want to say, like why they decided to jump in? Because if you just want me to keep talking, I'll happily do that. Because as I mentioned, does anybody in here like Roman history? There was that whole like TikTok trend, right? It's like, what's your Roman Empire? That I was not all about the Roman Empire before working on Doom of Valyria. Like I decided this was the project I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to try to put out there. And then I was doing research, watching documentaries. Then I watched the show Rome, and I was like, yo, Rome goes hard. Like that show is great, but also just Roman society was just so incredible. When I say incredible, it's amazing how similar the Romans lived to how we live now, minus basic technology, right? It's like, they had shopping malls they would go to. They had hot water. They were very clean. They did all kinds of things that was. So that's what was definitely going to be a focus of Doom of Valyria. It's like, yes, this takes place 400 years before Game of Thrones, but just like the Roman Empire, the Valyrians would live much better than the people in Game of Thrones, right? Like they can get around easier. They have luxuries. They have better tech in any number of ways. So like in the show, you've got the Valyrian steel, and it's like, oh, how did they make Valyrian steel? Well, that was going to be a fun thing to explore in Doom of Valyria, right? Like we would have an opportunity to see how Valyrian steel was made. And as you guys may have remembered from the pilot, we established that there's like these three powerhouses, which is a lore change from what was said. Like, it's like the 40 dragon lore families, but we presented this idea of three, which I'll get into why I changed that. But one of the three, the House Therisar, they're more of the economy types, right? They're worried about trade and making money and expanding in that regard. So they have like all three houses kind of like to shape what they imagine dragons to be, right? So if you look at the opening sequence of Doom, you see like the three houses, but you see three very different dragons, right? You got like a little dragon with a long tail wrapped around a pipe. I mean, it's supposed to look like the medical image, right? But it's also a small dragon with a long tail, so it's like it's been bred to be different from the other dragons. And then you've got the House Therosaur dragon, which is more kind of like a medieval four-legged dragon. It doesn't, you look at it, you're like, that thing can't fly. I don't care how big its wings are, it's too heavy. And that was on purpose as well. And then the Targaryen dragons are the ones that we know and see in the show. These are kind of like the origin dragons. These are the ones that can fly and explore. Because that was supposed to be, so the three houses were supposed to have their thing, right? One wants to focus on magic, one wants to focus on like trade and commerce, and one wanted to focus on exploration and combat. But so anyway, the whole Valyrian steel that we hope to see one day, like we're like, how is Valyrian steel made? Well, we would have found out in Doom, and it would have been House Therosaur. House Therosaur would have been the ones that made Valyrian steel because they're worried about making good products, like selling things. And what I wanted to show is that their dragons were focused on being just almost like Clydesdale horses, like just big and strong so they can move things around. But the House Therosaur was also going to make the fire that their dragons breathe much stronger than any of the other dragons. So even like a Targaryen dragon wouldn't have as hot of a fire as a Therosaur dragon. So it made it the perfect type of dragon for steelwork, right? Because they can reach temperatures that even though what like the Iron Throne is thanks to a Targaryen dragon. But so yeah, so oh hey, Two Keys, welcome back again. You said Africa, right? Or Kenya specifically. Welcome back, man. What time is it over there? And can I also ask Two Keys while you're here contributing? Kenyan, yeah, awesome. Have you watched both like Stewie Potter and Doom of Valyria, or did you just like? Because I know you were here for the. It's 9:30 a.m. or p.m. there. I can Google it myself. I'm just curious. Like, if it's like almost bedtime for you. I know 9:30 p.m. Yeah, it'll almost be bedtime for me at 9:30. Well, welcome back. But yeah, so I was asking Two Keys if like you watched both Stewie Potter and Doom of Valyria, or if you were just kind of joined in for one or the other. But either way, I'm glad you're here. I also have other images and stuff popped up and ready to go. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to rant about some things. But while I'm waiting to hear from Two Keys, I also just wanted to keep going. Like, so kind of the world building element. Like I knew it was going to be Rome. I knew Doom of Valyria was going to be a Roman world, just Rome with dragons, right? That we made that very clear. But we also know that the Roman Empire. Oh, cool. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed Doom of Valyria. It's like 20 minutes long, so if it's almost bedtime for you, I don't know. But it's I'm glad you watched Stewie Potter. I just love making fantasy things, so that's why I picked both those things to make. But anyway, yeah, I guess I was reading out the comments without saying that. Two Keys chimed in saying that he's watched Stewie Potter, but we'll check out Doom of Valyria, and it's cool. I appreciate you. I appreciate anybody watching the content, because Doom of Valyria took me a long time. I was creating and animating that for 2 years while parking cars. I moved out to LA and I was parking cars for about 7 years, and it was cool because it was like so early on. About after 2 years of being out here, that's when I started making the South Park and the Family Guy. No, Tuki says he's excited for Paraland. Well, thank you. I'm excited to show it off when the time is right. Right now, I am doing my best to get in the right hands, because Doom of Valyria is the perfect example. You know, a lot of people chimed in and said, "Hey, man, when are you making episode 2?" It's like, dude, I spent 2 years making episode 1 of Doom of Valyria. 2 years to get a 20-minute episode out. And you know, there's some other great YouTubers that are doing something similar, like Oda King. Like he made that Star Wars TIE Fighter video, amazing. And he seems to be content doing that. But I came out here as a writer. I wanted to tell full stories, and so Doom of Valyria was awesome making the pilot and setting up all the stuff because, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, like I have this notebook that like I listed out all the ideas of where the story was going. I make sure whenever I'm tackling a project that I know where it's all going before I begin, because that's just gonna create so many problems if you don't. But so it was awesome getting the pilot out there, but then it's like, oh man, like I want people to see it through because I've been there with everyone. I've been there with everyone through the end of Game of Thrones. Like, you know, like I was there with everyone. Season 5, we're loving Game of Thrones. Season 6 was good. Season 6 of Game of Thrones, we're like, yes, Sansa's getting some revenge. We're getting some closure on things. Season 7, we're going, would Tyrion say that? Is that something Tyrion would say? And then season 8, we're just like, oh, okay. Subvert expectations, I guess. So I want to make sure that anytime I'm making a story that we see it through to the end, and we also make sure that before we even begin, we've got a good ending figured out. And in my opinion, if a whole community, like say there's a whole community for Paraland, and you guys are racking your brains together, like where do we think this is going? Where do we think Paraland's going to end up? If you guys figure it out, that's not a bad thing. Like I feel like writers sometimes worry that if the fans guess the ending and then that's the ending that happens, that there'd be some issues. But it's like, how can you compete with hundreds of thousands of fans, you know, exchanging notes and saying like, "Hey man, did you see this episode? They said this, they said this. This has got to be the ending, right?" And then the writers are going, "Shit, how do we not make that the ending?" It's like, no, man, good for y'all. If you follow the crumb trails and you reach the end, that's how it should be. So anyway, Doom of Valyria, I had the ending already plotted out, and that's how I helped build the world for it, right? Because I was looking at Game of Thrones. Like when I started Doom of Valyria, season 5 had just finished, I believe. So the fact that it took me 2 years really worried me, right? Because it's like as I'm animating it, they're potentially changing the trajectory of the world, right? So as I was trying to build the Valyria world, I was having to make guesses about what's going to happen in the show, because the Doom of Valyria. Tukis asked, is there a point where you change the plot after the initial planning? Well, as I did different revisions of the script, there were definitely some changes, but I was pretty happy with the guesses that I made beforehand and when the show came out. Like, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones or not, but there was a big leap that I took. So if you read through the comments in the Doom of Valyria video, some people guess they're like, "Hey, there's this little girl. Her name is Millie. Is that Melisandre from Game of Thrones, the Red Priestess?" And the answer was yes. That was planned all along. Just because I wanted to like this character, the Red Priestess, seemed to be connected to R'hllor, the Lord of Light, who I was trying to present as the reason dragons existed. Like Doom of Valyria was trying to present this idea that R'hllor, the Lord of Light, is the creator of dragons. That's why the imagery of him in the opening scene is like a dragon head, and he brings out these wings that, and there was a reason for that. So in terms of, I was reading through a lot of wikis and things in terms of like what George had laid out in the books, and in terms of like how he was trying to build a foundation for how magic works and all that. Jam says Doom of Valyria is so awesome. Huge fan of that world, and seeing Valyria was awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for joining in. Yeah, I was just gonna say that in terms of what I thought George. So this all disclaimer, right? It's like I'm trying to make something, and I'm trying to guess what George R. Martin was thinking. You know, nobody's perfect, but one thing I noticed that actually changed in the show, and this was a huge discouragement for me when thinking about making anything else. So one thing I noticed, like if you think about the show, and you remember when Daenerys, she got to, what was the name of the city? Karth, I believe, with a Q. There's mages there that are saying like, hey, ever since your dragons have been born, my magic is kind of flaring up again. I seem to be capable of things I couldn't before. And there seemed to be in the books that George had, is every kind of location had almost kind of like its own magic and a creature that represented that magic. So like you've got the forest dwellers, right, in the north, and you've got the wormwood trees. You've got these big white trees. They seem like the power sources. Like as you know, the forest dwellers are going to want to protect the trees because they are the source of power for them. And then even for fire mages, people who are using fire magic, the dragons are their source of power. And it's said overtly in the show pretty much, right? You know, it's like as the dragons got bigger, fire magic got stronger, right? So I was like, okay, so he's saying that each location has their own magic and its own kind of like sacred animal or something that's associated with that magic. Because I found other examples, you know, it's been literally years since I read through it. So if anybody hears me say any inaccuracies, type it out and I'll correct myself. But I believe it was the location was called like Volantis or something, where it was the water people that ended up in, they were the ones that lost a war to the Valyrians and were kind of outcasted and ended up in, what am I blanking on the name of it? The southern Dorne. You know, they became Dorne after that, but they were associated with being like water mages. Like they had water magic and they had these giant turtles, right? So you've got water magic with giant turtles. You've got fire magic with giant dragons. You've got forest magic with giant trees. You know, it felt like to me the evidence was there. And so I was also making a guess that each one is kind of their own separate thing. So the big change that happened in the show that really kind of hurt my momentum of making Doom of Valyria was, spoiler warning for those who have not watched Game of Thrones, the forest dwellers reveal that they created the White Walkers, that they like pushed dragon glass into a human and it made him into the White Walkers. I disagreed with that, right? I was like, well, hey, the evidence that I was seeing laid out by George, that it's, yeah, exactly, the children of the forest, it was said in the show that they created the White Walkers. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a mistake we made. And it's like, I mean, George was around, he had to sign off on it, but it seemed to me that the forest would be separate from the ice people, right? Because if you also read, big mistake, who, them or me? Jam said, big mistake, but I'm missing context. Because it's okay if I'm wrong, but I thought it was a mistake on their part to say the children of the forest created the White Walkers. I think it kind of reduced their role. Oh, just Bento, you're just now seeing this. It's okay. I'm only just getting started on it all. Yeah, the children of the forest, I don't think, I think it would be cool if later on that they like change that, right? It's not fun when they have to go back and change canon, but it does happen, right? In Star Wars, they're like, oh yeah, the midichlorians, yeah, that's not canon. That was just Qui-Gon speaking baloney. But it would be nice if something similar happened with the Children of the Forest having made the White Walkers. I think the White Walkers should be their own entity because there is such thing as ice magic. And in the research that I did, I'm talking about these different animals representing different magic, right? The wormwood trees for the forest, the turtles for the water, the dragons for the fire. Well, there's also records of giant spiders that would be in the ice area. And it's like, yo, I hate spiders. That would be awesome to see these giant spiders that I hate, but that they're the battery for it. So that would mean that as the White Walkers are gaining power, leading towards the long night, there must be more spiders popping up. They must have more. But then we got the zombie dragon instead of spiders, which I guess is cool. All right, Tukey said, given that I had not read the books, I thought the guy leading the White Walkers was the Mad King who was killed previously. Well, that was such the fun thing of, oh, somebody I know is in the chat. That was a lame origin story for the White Walkers. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for agreeing with me. A friend should. But yeah, so for Doom of Valyria, the plan was that that the White Walkers weren't made by the Children of the Forest. They were their own thing, just as the Children of the Forest are their own thing, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, that really kind of because originally the plan with making Doom of Valyria, the ambitious plan was, we knew at that point they had already announced that they were going to finish at season 8. So the plan with Doom of Valyria was that it's a prequel, but the idea is that we go through these 8 seasons of Game of Thrones and we have this great conclusive ending with the Long Night. We have this great conclusion of what happened with the White Walkers, but then I'm like, well, the books are called A Song of Ice and Fire. So wouldn't it be nice to have another story, even if it's short, kind of dwell on when the fire was about to win, right? So it's like ice is about to win in the Long Night, but what about when was the fire powerful and who was taking on the fire? What stopped the fire from just ruling the world? And Valyrians had dragons, they had fire, and they ruled for 5,000 years and looking like they were going to continue to expand. And then suddenly, like that, 14 volcanoes erupt and they're gone. So I thought that was the interesting story to tell after, right? We get this long story of the ice. Now we need at least something of the fire. So that was Doom of Valyria. And also the hope was once you watched Doom of Valyria, it was going to be kind of like Star Wars's, what was it, Rogue One? That it's like, you're like, oh, okay, I see how this links up to the Death Star. So even though it's a prequel, it kind of brings you back into the story of things. So the most ambitious goal would have been seasons 1 through 8 of Game of Thrones, and then 2 seasons of Doom of Valyria, and then 1 more season of Game of Thrones that takes everything we learned about Valyria and kind of injects it into how we resolve things. All right, we're getting some comments. Let me check it out here. George has said the books are the books and the show is the show. Both are correct for their mediums. I appreciate that, Just Beto. I think that the way I always looked at it is that the books are the rough draft for the show, right? George has kind of seen the story through once. They go, okay, cool. Like we like what he did here. It doesn't really make sense to do this there, right? Kind of like Lady Stoneheart never made it into the show, which is fine, I guess. But, lots of changes made because we look at the books as a draft. And Doom of Valyria was definitely trying to play off of the lore built in the show. Like, for example, in the books, Daenerys is not fireproof. But in the show, like, overtly so, right? Like, she had the whole thing. She's like, I'm going to burn this place down and I'm going to walk out. And everyone's going to be like, yo, she goes hard. And so it's like, okay, for Doom of Valyria, I think it's fine to say that the Targaryen blood is magical. It's got the magic to keep them safe from fire, and that also makes sense, right? If you've got the Lord of Light being like, I'm going to give y'all dragons, and I want y'all to conquer the world with my dragons, well, then it makes sense for him to make sure that homeboys don't get burned to a crisp by their own creatures, right? So, kind of like, with Star Wars with the Jedi, right? Like, here's a lightsaber. It's like, dude, better have the Force, because one wrong swipe of a lightsaber and there goes your arm. All right, let's see. Jamal said the White Walker thread is so cool in the books compared to the show. Also, Euron the Grey, Euron the guy who talks about putting a finger in Cersei's bum, is the most evil guy and who will bring about the long night. Yeah, I definitely heard that they had different levels of roles in the show. Like Euron is the one of the Greyjoys, right? And poor Reek, right? The whole Greyjoy plot. But yeah, there was a lot that happened in the show, and so it definitely made the idea of, well, one, I spent 2 years making this pilot, and it wasn't even the full story that I wanted to tell, right? It was a 20-minute pilot, but I wanted to actually make like a full hour-long drama, because the hope was for it to be a live-action show just like any others. But I was like, hey, I'm an animator. I can at least animate something. So I did like a half version of it. But before I get into that extended pilot, I wanted to address something that the comments of Doom of Valyria have always been dominated by, which is the lore changes, right? So it's like one of the first things that people who are chiming in on it like to say is, well, I read that in Valyria, the Targaryens were actually a very minor house. Like there's these 40 houses, and the Targaryens were nobodies. And I read that too. We read that, and that they also said that incest was super normal in their society. And I go, I hear you. But I read that stuff, and if I were to go back and redo the Doom of Valyria pilot, one of the things I would do differently is have kind of a prologue before the opening, and it would have been with some maesters. Carpe Imodium, it's you, bro. All I can be is me, bro. That the reason, so the other intro I would have done is had maesters at the Citadel talking about history, because in fact, I think it was season 7 where we did have maesters talking to each other, and one of them was like, oh yeah, that one maester, he likes to be a little bit more colorful with his history writing. And essentially he's saying that just because it's written in a history book doesn't mean that's the cold hard facts, bro. Right? That's what was said in the show. And I'm like, yeah, like that's, if it's written that the Targaryens were this minor Dragon Lord family and they weren't anywhere close to the Doom when it happened, and incest was normal there, so just don't think it's weird when we're doing it. To me, I thought that was a lot more fun of a story and way more interesting of a story if all of that was a lie perpetuated by the Targaryens. Because you feel like human psychology, most people, if they know nobody is around to check them on the story, right? Like if all the Valyrians are gone, Jam said that's what they tried to say in House of the Dragon when they try to defend their bad writing choices. Well, I mean, I would say the big thing right now with House of the Dragon is the no payoff, right? Like everybody got used to Game of Thrones, throwing you a bone in episodes 8, 9, 10, right? They're like, okay, first 6, 7 episodes, we're going to build up and then boom, payoff. And I heard that the final episode, everyone's like, wait, it's over? So definitely didn't want to do that in Doom of Valyria. So what I will quick just kind of get off on a tangent real quick. So the plot of Doom of Valyria was going to be 2 seasons, and at the end of the first season was going to be the outbreak of a civil war. So it was supposed to be in true Roman fashion, that you've got these different houses, these different factions of Roman nobility fighting over what's going on, and that so the wedding is approaching, right? Like if you watch it, like each episode is another festivity of the wedding. The wedding takes like a whole week, but then as the wedding finally is about to happen, there's a huge blow up. There's civil war breaking out, and so then the wedding doesn't happen, right? So season 2 would then be about the civil war, the breakout of how they handle all of that, and then eventually the doom, right? You got to end with the volcanoes erupting. So that's what would have been, right? So we would have had season 1 would have been wedding festivities building up to the civil war, and then season 2 is the war and what role did everybody play in creating the doom itself. So anyway, back on the lore changes, again, I just thought that human psychology is, if nobody's around to check you, don't you say you were better than you were? It's like, oh yeah, we were top dogs, right? And you go, Carpe Ammonium, I just looked at your Paraland video. I'm stoked. Your take on the Doom was the greatest idea for a spin-off. House of the Dragon was just written poorly. They couldn't stay consistent with character arcs except Aegon. I hear you, man. I'll let you guys know. I would be happy to do a Game of Thrones story. I would love, like, if I managed to work with them and make Doom of Valyria, I would love to do it. But I'm definitely committed to Paraland, because that's a fantasy world that I have control over. So when I'm putting years of work into developing something for you guys, and then other writers elsewhere say like, yeah, it was the children just put some dragon glass in them. I'm just like, guys, you're kind of ruining something I wrote, which I have no say in it. George should watch Doom of Valyria. I think he would love it. Okay. Conspiracy theory time. I don't have my phone on me, but so there's a lot of legal stuff going on in Hollywood. You know, people can't say that they saw this, or they can say they saw that, or if you get it over to them, you got to get over to them the right way. And I've been trying to learn that, right? But I put Doom of Valyria out there, and that was like July 9th, 2017, I believe. And it went trending because I timed it around the new season of Game of Thrones. So I put it out like right before the new season dropped. And it went trending on YouTube. It was like number 7 trending on YouTube. And then that same week, like just a few days later, George R. R. Martin tweeted about the Doom of Valyria. He had one of the images from one of his books, like a depiction of Valyria, and he had a quote about the poor Valyria and its dreaded fate. And all of his followers were saying, George, what are you saying? What are you talking about? Are you going to do something with Valyria? Like, is there a Valyria story coming? And that was, he never said anything again after it. And that was the end of it, right? And there hasn't been any announcements of anything Valyrian related. So my personal theory is he saw it. He can't say that he saw it because the industry is crazy about that kind of stuff. But I also understand it. Like, also on the conspiracy thing, have any of you guys heard about the woman that claims to have written The Matrix and Terminator 2 and some other story that she's like, yeah, I wrote all of that. And it's like, she shopped a script around that was similar to them all, but it's like, yeah, it's a loose fit. But anyway, so back on the lore changes, I just thought it would make a much better story for all of us, right? If you have been watching Game of Thrones and you got so into it and you read the lore and you go, oh yeah, the Targaryens were this minor family. They weren't anywhere close to the Doom when it happened. Yeah, incest was normal. And then you check out Doom of Valyria And then all of a sudden, and say Doom of Valyria is made by George and company, and they go, the Targaryens weren't just a minor family. In fact, they were, the House Julii. They were the Caesar of Valyria. Oh, and actually, incest wasn't normal. The Targaryens are the ones trying to push it onto Valyrians, and that, oh, not only were they there during the Doom, they were trying to have a wedding during the Doom. It's like, you turn all of the information that we know on its head. It's like, then you get to go, all right, I don't know what happened in Valyria. Tell me what happened, right? So that's why I also tried to be very overt with the changes, like in the scene with Aenar and the other, main houses, that, they're like, hey, no one's ever had an incest wedding before. I wanted it to be very overt. And it's funny because people go, it's like, dude, how did you miss that, Patrick? I'm like, I didn't miss it. I'm like trying to, but I also understand sometimes things aren't clear. So that's a regret of mine. I would have gone back and made it clear that we're changing these things because we want you to be in as much suspense as possible. We want you to be able to just say, okay, what happened? What really went down? So that's the reason I did the lore changes. And so as for the full pilot, like I had this full 40-ish minute pilot planned out, but I was like, all right, I can only do but so much. Whittle it down to 20. One of a couple of scenes were going to happen. A few more were going to involve Ben Stark, and a few more were going to involve Gaiman Targaryen, the brother to be wed to his sister. Which, by the way, on that point real quick, not to divulge off, but that, when some people argue that it's okay that Valyria was incestuous because it was normal in even our own histories. I'm happy to see examples people have, but the quickest, biggest example I could find is the Egyptians, right? But that it wasn't all Egyptians. It wasn't Egyptian nobility that were incest. It was just the rulers, right? Because they saw themselves as gods, and they're like, we're gods. We shouldn't be mingling with mortals, right? So that's a very extreme thing. So if that's how it played out in Egypt, then you can imagine in Rome or Valyria, for example, the idea of incest is a family saying, we're better than the rest of you because we don't need to commingle with y'all. We are superior. So I always just thought that it would make for a better story that incest isn't normal. And so Atia the Julii, a call for justice. Carpe Imodium knows as Rome. Dude, like, Rome was definitely a huge influence for building Doom of Valyria. To this day, I love it and tried my best to make sure that Doom of Valyria was going to capture a lot of those elements because it was so good. I remember watching it and what was it? The guy that played Mark Anthony. He deep cuts. But so anyway, yeah, I'm jumping all over the place. Rome was a great show. But so in the full pilot, we were going to get more scenes with Ben Stark. We were going to get more scenes with Gaiman Targaryen, who was the brother to be married. And so, for example, I'll kind of show you guys some along the way. Where am I at? So I had some things pulled up just so, like some different example of things. So like this is pilot, right? So for example, where do we have Aenar coming home? All right, so this whole scene with Aenar and Alia, this was in the Adventures of Little Millie. Yeah. So this scene in the full pilot takes place after a dinner party. As you could see, Alia is dressed up. She's still got her wine. He accuses her of being drunk. He's like, "You're drunk. Go to bed." And that's because in the full pilot there was a whole dinner party where there was Carpe talk about Melisandre. Yeah, I'll talk because actually in the full pilot there is another scene with young Millie, aka Melisandre. So I'll get into that some. So there was going to be a whole dinner party scene, and in fact, when we meet Danis and Sanesa, it was in preparation for the party. Or I got to look back over the outline, but essentially this was potentially after the party as well, right? So like she was all dressed up, but then Sanesa's like, hey, calm down, go to sleep, because it was kind of a disaster, right? The party did not go so well because it's if you watch Rome, it's very much like a Atia kind of button heads with God, I can't remember her name right now. The one that Carpe was quoting. It's like yeah, that she's cursing Atia. It's like the way that they would go at it. So there was going to be a dinner party that was definitely in the vein of the Roman women butting heads, which is such a great device in the show Rome, and we needed to have it because we had the guys arguing right in the tower, which we needed for plot, but we definitely needed a party scene with all the women because there was also going to be, I believe I came faster than Drogon in the way to rescue Daenerys in the Colosseum. What? Servilia, yes. Carpe with the. Will we ever see the full pilot? Here's the thing: if I manage to work with people who own the rights to the IP, yeah, absolutely. Like I'm sure they would want to redo things. Like if they were interested in making this, they're not going to just take this and copy and paste it, right? They're going to want to have changes. We've had the show finished, right? The Game of Thrones is finished, so the lore and stuff that we would be doing in Doom of Valyria would change as well. So is the idea of a full pilot or a second episode possible? Yes, but not independently by me. As long as I'm independent, I'm working on Paraland. That's what I'm making for y'all because I get to call the final shots on it, right? Well, it's more so it's like, no, I put out Doom of Valyria and people go, what do you mean? The Targaryens were a minor family or whatever. It's like, but I put out Paraland, I make up this whole new world and all this stuff. No one's gonna go, no, you got that wrong. What do you mean I wrote it? It wouldn't stop some people, but you know what I mean. But so, yeah, there'd be a great dinner party scene. And I think in House of the Dragon, they have House Valerian, am I right? Because and it's played by Black people with cool white hair, right? That's actually cool because I was going to have the same thing in Doom of Valyria. So House Valerian was going to be there, and they were going to be at the party that the women are it's the night before the wedding festivity, so they're throwing a party for Danis and Gaiman, but all the women are conniving, they're shit talking, and House Valerian is there, and House Valerian became one of the 40 Dragonlord families in Doom, but they were put in there by the Targaryens, and they're like 0% Valyrian. The idea was going to be that they controlled a lot of power near Dragonstone, and so they were kind of the gateway for the Targaryens to make their way into Westeros. So they kind of just like, okay, we'll make you a Dragonlord family. You're loyal to us, so we'll make you powerful in our empire, but you're going to do what we say. So essentially, the Valyrians were brought in to be puppets. If you watch the show Rome, it's similar to when Caesar was putting in a bunch of the Gauls. They were adding all these Gallic people to the Senate, and the Romans were seeing this as a farce. It was a mockery of their divine Senate, And so the Valyrians were going to hold a similar role in this, where they're just like, oh, the Targaryens, they're just screwing with us. But so that was going to pave the way for some things. But then another, in that same scene where we've got, so Gaiman meets with his sister, they talk, and then afterwards, these two talk about that they had their own child together that got burned and was dead and gone because of Targaryen traditions. That's something we made up for this that I thought would be kind of a scary but cool detail, that this idea that Targaryens are so about the proof that they were of the originals, that any child that gets born is going to be baptized by fire because they're Targaryen, they should survive it, right? But then essentially what happened in the plot is Aenar didn't essentially found out from his parents that he's the result of incest, that the Targaryens have been doing incest for a while. Carpe quickly said, I want to hear everything about Doom, but quickly, when could we possibly see a Paraland pilot? Obviously, the priority is getting picked up by studios, but what's best case versus worst case time-wise? I appreciate that, Carpe. That's why I'm doing these lives, to give everybody a chance to hear some more about Doom. But when I'm not doing these, I'm zeroed in on Paraland. So I have a 3.5, almost 4-minute preview of Paraland, and it's essentially the opening 3.5 minutes of the pilot. And the pilot for Paraland is only about 12 to 14 minutes. My thinking is that I want to get you guys invested in a whole new world that came out of nowhere. So I'll give you like a 3.5 minute trailer, if you will, but also just introduction to the world. And then the pilot is like just another 10 minutes, right? So, okay, just watch 10 more minutes. And then the first season would be 7 episodes. So it's like, okay, you got through the pilot, you only got 6 more episodes to watch. So in terms of seeing the full pilot, my plan right now, and I reserve the right to change, is I am going through studios, going through executives, see what they think. But in 2025, next year, I'm fully prepared to independently create this. So the idea is that no matter what happens, we just get through it, because I believe strongly in Paraland. I think you guys would love the first season, and if you guys think that Doom of Valyria has more plot in it than what happened, like a lot of comments, like more plot than season 8 of Game of Thrones, and I appreciate that, and that's what I want to do with Paraland. I also want Paraland to be fun, adventurous. So if you guys look at the hype trailer, there's a lot of active cuts. Like I want there to be cool mysteries that we're trying to figure out along the way. I want you guys to be able to come up with your own theories and things, and ain't going to be. I know what I want to have happen in Paraland. If you guys figure it out beforehand, kudos to you. I'm not changing just because you guys guessed it before me. It means I left the right breadcrumbs, and I even actually have a subreddit already for Paraland. You guys can. I don't have anything posted there yet. I just wanted to have it ready for you all. You see, there's a nice little picture of the trio. But as I start to put out more information, and you guys want to theorize what you think is going to happen and all that, I wanted to have a nice subreddit for you guys to post all that. So it's literally r/Paraland. If you guys want to start going like, what the hell is this guy up to? And actually, we're already at 54 minutes. I was only planning on doing live for an hour, but there's so much to talk about with Duke. So what I will do is I will finish up one more thing about the full pilot that would have been, just because I think this would have been cool. So I'm going to rewind back. So after this scene, right? So we've got Ben and Millie. She tells him, make sure to shut your window, because that's kind of life in Paraland. I mean, life in Valyria. And sorry, real quick, Adult Swim. I know they don't pay much, especially with Amazon Prime writing checks, but would you consider their patronage? I have a feeling you'd prefer Prime, Netflix, or somebody writing big checks. I hear you. Adult Swim is not going to be a good fit because my goal with Paraland is to make sure that it's fun and there's a good linearity to it, right? I want you guys to be able to follow along. I don't want gratuitousness. Like even in Doom of Valyria, right? I have a sex scene because that's what Game of Thrones does. But other than that, like I don't I don't know. Obviously, if Adult Swim wants to work with me and they don't mind the way I'm doing things, great. But I also understand that they have an audience that they want to try to adhere to, and I'm gonna try to be respectful of that. But anyway, so in this scene, Millie kind of tells Ben, like, hey, shut your window. Yeah, thanks, Carpe. I feel you too. And then Ben reveals that he was better off back at the wall. And that's a big clue to his character. Like, what does that mean? Well, yes, I'll tell you guys now. He was a member of the Night's Watch. But 400 years ago from Game of Thrones, like, you know, in Game of Thrones, the Night's Watch were kind of a joke, right? Like, they're a shell of their former selves. But 400 years ago, the idea was that the Night's Watch was kind of more so almost kind of like the US Army during the Vietnam War. So what I wanted to kind of have as Ben's backstory is he kind of witnesses a My Lai massacre type of event with the Night's Watch. They kind of go up to the wildlings and just kind of just slaughter people. And he's just like, dude, like I know I took a vow, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do what they're doing. So he's kind of a dead man walking, right? He can't go home because we know how the Starks are, but he won't do what the Night's Watch is doing at that 400-year ago mark. But anyway, so after this scene, what we were going to have is Millie going home. So there's going to be a scene where she is leaving Bellicose. Thanks, Carpe. So Millie was going to be going home, and as soon as she kind of leaves Bellicose and gets to her home, she's going to open her door, and her dad is there. He's drunk and he's yelling stuff at her. So we're like, oh, she's got a troubled home life. Like we're going to see what's going on. But then, as soon as she shuts the door, we see this shadowy figure pass by the camera. And then who do we see chasing the shadowy figure? Our good friend. Where is he? Is it over here? Yeah. Getting chased by none other than the Faceless Man. So there was going to be multiple scenes with the Faceless Man, and we're trying to establish what's going on. That, you know, in the pilot here, it's just a quick cameo of the Faceless Man, but in the full thing, there was going to be more of a role of what he's doing, why he's there, and what they represent. And yeah, so there is going to be a lot more clues laid out, and so I appreciate you guys hearing me out on that. I will do another Doom of Valyria live stream in 2 weeks, because I said I was going to do 4 of these. So last week I did Stewie Potter. This week I did Doom of Valyria. We talked about the Roman world building. We talked about why I changed certain things that I did for the lore and some of the other scenes that we would have seen. And I appreciate you guys for that. And so now I wanted to talk a little bit about Paraland, if you guys are still sticking around, like go a little bit over an hour. But the video is titled Doom of Valyria and the Gods of Paraland. So obviously in Doom of Valyria, we've got the Lord of Light, and we've got the Night King, and we've got what seems like these deity-like characters And for Doom of Valyria, hold on real quick. Carpe asks, would you ultimately have made the Faceless Men responsible for the actual Doom event? A lot of fans theorize about their role in causing the volcanoes to crack open all at once. What I will say, because I'm not going to spill all the beans right now. The Faceless Men were definitely going to have a big role, but in a way that would have been impossible through the current lore. So all the evidence that you guys have in terms of what happened in Valyria, I did want to have the Faceless Men there and be part of the Doom, but the role they play actually goes against another entity that I made up exclusively for Doom of Valyria. So this was an entity that I made up that did not, that was not part of the initial lore. So yes, they would have played a big role in the Doom happening, but not in any of the way the theories would have been, because you guys wouldn't have had the proper information. But it would have made sense as the show goes on, as you see who they're interacting with and why they're interacting with these people. Then you go, oh, okay, I see what's going on. So yes, they would have played a role. And the idea is that, you know, in this big scene with all the main houses, what I'm trying to establish here is, where is it? Trying to see a shot with everybody. But I was trying to establish that all three houses of the big houses are playing some type of role in the ultimate demise. You know, the Mage Council is creating abominations. Elfric is corrupting the Senate. You know, Therosaurs, they're just mining too much, trying to get too many resources. The Dragon Temple is killing off too many slaves. You know, they're asking for too many slaves, and Anar is expanding territories too much. So these were all going to play into how the Doom came about. You know, it's like if they're mining too, like because there's a lot of theories, right? One theory is that, oh, they overmined the volcanoes and that created the Doom. Well, the answer would be that's partially right. That was a partial contribution, but there was going to be many other things that factored into it, and what ultimately created the spark. So that's a longer answer than I expected for you, Carpe, about the Faceless Men's role in it. But anyway, so I was talking about Paraland, and one thing I loved when making Doom of Valyria was the Roman elements. And Carpe, right? So you would have added your own idea for another shadow group that the Faceless Men were perhaps at war with in the shadows, behind the histories, left out of the books. Not a shadowy group. It would have been a very apparent thing in the show. It's just more so that, like, I created some things for the Valyrian society, because we don't have too much aspects of what Valyrian society was like. So like in Rome, for example, Rome was a society that had freedom of religion, really, if you think about it. Like, every Roman citizen was allowed to worship what they wanted, but they did have like a religious council. And, you know, in the show, you've got Julius Caesar paying off the leader of the religious order to kind of gain favor from the people. Well, there would be stuff like that in Valyria, and that's not written out. There's no written out thing about like a organized religion group, but it would also make sense that they would still be a pillar of Valyrian society. So there's a society like that. There's other organizations that, like, even the whole Therosaurs, what the Therosaurs are doing is not something that's written out. So if the Faceless Men were at war with the Therosaurs, there wouldn't be any evidence for it from George's writings. If the Faceless Men were at war with the Mage Council that the House Polonus created, there would be no records of it. So yes, it would be a thing where it would be really hard for someone to get the right theory of what happened in Valyria without watching the show, because this is this is what happened, right? We're saying this is what happened. Here's all the things you couldn't have known, right? So sorry, getting real into it, but I appreciate your contributions, Carpe. Thanks for chiming in. So I'll try to be brief about Paraland then, and then wrap this up. I appreciate you guys sticking around. So the thing I loved about working on Doom of Valyria was the Roman society, and the Romans had their pantheon of gods, right? Carpe, got you. That's awesome. Thanks, man. I'll let you roll out Paraland. Thanks. No, I love enthusiasm. Never apologize for enthusiasm. And yes, it has been 7 years since I made Doom of Valyria, but I have been working on Paraland seriously, like since then. I made a trailer for Paraland in 2019, but I didn't like it. There was a lot of things wrong, and so I went back and changed things. And so I then spent another almost 5 years making another trailer, but I'm very happy with this one. And so that's why it's in film festivals. You can, if you guys live in LA or near LA, September 27th, you can see the 3.5-minute trailer / preview at the Burbank Film Festival. They're on my Instagram. There's links about it. But yeah, while I'm here with you guys, I wanted to show off some things, because I can't screen it online, but I can show you guys some things, right? I can show you images. So Paraland also uses kind of a Roman style pantheon, but the big difference between Paraland and say like Rome is we have 12 races of people, because to me that's so much fun. The 12, like when I played Elder Scrolls or Skyrim, it's like I'm like get me past all the humans. I want to be a Khajiit. I want to be I want to be an Argonian, right? I don't want to be human. So in Paraland, we have humans, but that's like the only human race. Now we've got other races that are going to be human-esque, right? Like the elves are very human, but they have in this world the elves have pointed ears, but they also have like antlers, which is kind of adjacent to some things in Lord of the Rings, but not fully. I kind of went deeper into it, kind of made them more forest dwelling type of elves. But there's a lot of fantasy out there that has changed or evolved what different races could be. But let me make this image a little bit bigger so you guys can see a bit better. So we've got, your traditional orcs, we've got your traditional elves, we've got traditional humans, and then in our society, the Khajiits in this situation are called warwicks, like a roaring lion. But then these faultiers are kind of like a satyr, right? Kind of like goat people. And then we've got tree people, which I think is a fun addition. It's like we've seen tree people and things, but they've never really been a part of society in a lot of fantasies that we watch. So I really wanted to have tree people. And same thing with insect people. I feel like in a lot of fantasies that I've watched and enjoyed, the short races kind of get the short end of the stick. It's like if I'm given choices, like I'm probably not going to want to be one of the short races because they're not going to work out too well. But Xantai are insect people, so they got lightning quick reflexes. They're really smart. Like a lot of advantages to them. They have 4 arms. Just give them something cool for having to do that. And then our main 3 characters are these 3, right? The elves, trolls, and humans. But I was actually trying to talk about the 12 gods of the pantheon of Paraland, but I wanted to establish the races first, that you see that there's almost kind of like a mirror going on. So our world has 12 races, and they're distinctly different from each other. And then we have a pantheon of gods, and it's also 12 gods that are in Paraland, and they're similar to Rome, but they're not the exact same. You got like Mimin, who's like the god of words, right? Like he would be, what muses would be associated with, like any of the arts or anything like that. So if someone is struggling with their words, they might be like, meme be damned, I can't think of the right thing to say. Because that was another fun thing about the show Rome. It's like, oh, Jew knows. they might shout out a god's name, and it's just like, you get it. You're with the program, and I'll go a little bit into the premise of the world. Is you've probably seen this image a few times on things I've promoted for Paraland. It's the Paraland Star of Hope. So the idea is that Paraland, the city, has a star right above it, almost kind of like the Jesus story, right? A star you can follow, but the star is always there. And so they call it the Star of Hope, and that's what the star was already there. So they're like, oh, this must be where the 12 gods lived. The 12 gods lived under this star. So what better place to create a society? So that's kind of the basic setup for the world of Paraland, is that kind of like Carthage, the Queen of Carthage, she made it like this sacred land. Like, if you ever heard the story of how she created like an outline, like she had like a single piece of leather, and she like made a deal with some dude. She was like, yeah, however much I can cover leather with, that's land I get to keep for X amount of dollars. And dude was like, yeah, sure, okay. And then she just put it out onto like a single thread, wrapped it all around this huge thing, and then that became Carthage. And Carthage was the first mega city, right? And then Rome became the first mega city with over 1 million people. And so Paraland kind of mirrors that as well, right? It's a mega city. It's the first really mega city, and it kind of gets to say, oh, well, we're Mount Olympus. We're living on Mount Olympus, essentially. So and that they say that the 12 gods lived there, but also similar to Rome, the 12 gods in Paraland kind of function differently than, like, if you played Elder Scrolls, like they've got the Daedric princes and whatnot, and they seem like gods or demigods. But in society, they might be like, oh, by the 9, blah, 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 blah. Like, they've got their sayings talking about their religions or whatnot. But in Paraland, there's kind of like this open and accepted, like they've accepted that this is their 12. Like, as citizens of Paraland, you can worship whoever you want or whatever, but as they represent certain things, they are part of the society. Thank you, Carpe. Carpe says that, tell I'm enthusiastic about it. Yes. I'm hoping you can show some of the settings and architecture. Yeah, I love the active Pantheon vibe. Thank you. Yeah, so that the 12 make their way into society. So, like, for example, where is she? Privia is this world's version of Fortune, right? The goddess of luck. So if you go and gamble anywhere, you're probably gambling at a temple of Privia, right? Or Corvum is the god of death and judgment. So if you're being judged, if you're in a court case and being sentenced for whatever crime, you're at a temple of Corvum, right? So as you interact throughout the world of Paraland, like, the more you know about the gods, the easier it is to recognize where someone might be. They're like, oh, they're going to go to a stage play. Okay, well, they're probably at a temple of Mima because he's the artistic one, right? So I wanted that to be there, and that's fun, and that what we can have is people kind of embodying these different gods, and then questions popping up, right? There'd be questions of, did the gods live there? Were the gods ever actually here, or just that lost to the sands of time? And that's going to be a fun subject to explore, because for the show of Paraland that I'm making, our trio is doing a lot of interacting with that element of this world. Is this the land of the gods? Why is it the land of the gods? What does that mean? And yeah, and actually, for you guys, like, literally just, what's today, Sunday? Friday, I just drew like a new poster for Paraland, so you'll be getting some of the first new artwork. So that's that's Paraland, right? That's our main trio. That's the name of the world. And then you can see the symbol of the 12 races, because I think that diversity is such a fun part of this like that's the fun of a fantasy world, right? It's like, so we've got these three main characters, right? We've got Jim, Fula, and Gromble, and we're going to be following them on their adventures, but there's going to be a main character for all 12 of these. And our trio, these three are going to be, they're going to be the ones that we're following. All right, so here is Rashikesh. Said, I'm super passionate about Daedric princes, and since this pantheon was kind of inspired from that, this is exciting stuff for me. Thank you. I love Elder Scrolls. I played Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Skyrim, and so that was a huge influence on this. The two biggest influences for Paraland is Elder Scrolls and The Legend of Zelda. So I want to make sure that this is fun, this is exciting, and that you kind of get the cool elements of a world like Skyrim, but we get to have fun with these characters. So that's all I really wanted to go over with you guys. Wanted to go over some of what was going to happen with Doom of Valyria, why I made some changes. Wanted to show you guys the 12 gods of Paraland, and show you guys the latest poster for Paraland. I made a different one before, but I just, wanted to do some more drawing while I wait and figure out what the next steps are. So I hope you guys stick around. And when Carpe said, I've never seen that animation style outside of comedy, but you completely pull it off with your mind for serious architecture and atmosphere. It automatically takes you out of the Family Guy expectations. Thank you. I wanted the characters to be pleasant to look at, but also be able to hit, any comedic lines. Like, I'm telling you right now, this dude, Gromble, is our comedy engine. Jim is he's our powerful leader, but the world likes to kind of mess with him because he's an easy target, right? He's Jerry Seinfeld. Like, the comedic elements is this is George, this is Jerry, and this is Elaine. Right? It's like it's Seinfeld and Skyrim. And but I believe that you can't have comedy in fantasy without first really buckling down on the fantasy. I want to make sure that you guys are like, yo, I'm into this world. I like it. That's the top priority for me. And then once you're in it, let the jokes come, right? And so hopefully with the things I've made, what you've seen, hopefully you believe in me. And so I'll keep telling you guys some more things, leaking what I can as things get closer. Once the film festivals are kind of wrapped up, I can show more footage. But as for now, I'm just kind of leaking little bits here and there for you guys. So I appreciate you all coming on. And next week, I will be doing another Stewie Potter. I will be revealing what the end of Stewie Potter was going to be. More details about some scenes that I had in mind, like in the later stories of the first film of Harry Potter, and how Voldemort would have played his role in Stewie Potter. And then the week after, I'm going to do another Doom of Valyria, and there's a theme with that one as well. It's going to be Doom of Valyria and the fate of Paraland. So I'll talk some more about Paraland and what the journey is going to be all for, right? So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much, and hopefully I see any of you all next week. Thank you so much.